Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Tuesday everybody. Yesterday, Monday, US President Biden and General Secretary Xi Jinping met for 3 hours in Bali. The two heads of state are in Indonesia to attend the G20 conference. This is the first time the two have met face-to-face since Biden entered the White House. Both mainstream Anglophone media, as well as Chinese state media, covered the meeting with cautiously optimistic language. Based on the readouts provided so far, I would describe the meeting as cool, but relatively constructive. The US readout said that Xi and Biden reiterated, quote, that a nuclear war should never be fought and can never be won, and underscored their opposition to the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. End quote. This obvious swipe at Putin was covered in many Anglophone media stories, including with the Financial Times, Bloomberg, and the New York Times. However, we should note that there was no mention of the statement in the official PRC readout. The US readout also expressed that the two leaders agreed that senior officials would maintain communication on a range of transnational issues, including climate change, global economic stability, and food security. Of course, there were also some sparks during the meeting. Unsurprisingly, Taiwan was a prominent and sensitive theme. According to the Chinese readout, Xi told Biden that the, quote, Taiwan question is at the very core of China's core interests, the bedrock of the political foundation of China-US relations, and the first red line that must not be crossed in China-US relations, end quote. At the news conference after the meeting, Biden said that he had told Xi that US policy on Taiwan had, quote, not changed at all, end quote, and that Washington remained committed to a peaceful resolution of tensions, adding that he does not believe, quote, that there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan, end quote. We should note the use of this word imminent here. We remember that in two high-profile comments in the past month, US Secretary of State Blinken expressed that the administration believes that Beijing, quote, has accelerated its timetable to invade Taiwan, end quote. In a separate White House statement yesterday, the administration added that Biden had raised concerns in private with Xi about China's, quote, increasingly aggressive actions towards Taiwan, end quote. And on this point this week, the details of an arms assistance package to Taipei is being finalized as part of the U.S. National Defense Authorization Act. Details which, according to the Washington Post, congressional aides say the White House has been actively involved in. The act would allow the provision annually to Taiwan of $1 billion worth of stockpiled U.S. munitions, what's known as Presidential Drawdown Authority, and up to $2 billion worth of weapons annually for 5 years, paid for with US tax dollars. A big deal, the Washington Post points out, as only Israel gets more on an annual basis. Meanwhile, according to Chinese state media, during the Xi-Biden meeting, Xi Jinping noted that, quote, freedom, democracy and human rights are the common pursuit of humanity and also the unwavering pursuit of the Communist Party of China. Just as the United States has American-style democracy, China has Chinese-style democracy, end quote. This so-called Chinese-style democracy is a common theme we have seen strongly emerge in state media's international coverage over the last 2 to 3 years, part of China's renewed global PR efforts. Mainstream state media appears to have been relatively restrained in their coverage of the Xi-Biden meeting, with the more nationalistic Global Times remaining more provocative. For example, placing all of the blame for the current state of US-China relations entirely at the feet of the Americans, writing yesterday, quote, it is not difficult to find that each time the continuous deterioration of China-US relations happens, it is due to the unilateral provocation by the United States. As the saying goes, whoever starts the trouble should end it. Only if the US takes the right attitude and practical actions can China-US relations return to the right track. End quote. After the Biden-Xi meeting, it was announced that the US Secretary of State Blinken would be visiting China in 2023, his first as Secretary of State. The trip, quote, would have the same broad aims as the meeting in Bali, to keep the lines of communication open and to have frank exchanges about important issues at senior levels in order to avoid conflict." End quote. US Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen is in Bali also. Speaking to US media in an interview, the former Fed chair made an interesting observation about her view of the new generation of Chinese economic leadership. Quote, "You have a generation of people who were rather pro-market and interested in fostering China's integration with the global economy who are retiring. And I personally don't know that much about the new generation of people who are going to be in these positions. So I'm uncertain about exactly what lies ahead." End quote. In the press conference after the meeting, Biden said that he was, quote, "not looking for conflict," end quote, and that he wanted to manage US-China competition reasonably. He also stressed that, quote, "there need not be a new Cold War," end quote. In their meeting, she expressed to Biden, quote, "China does not seek to change the existing international order or interfere in the internal affairs of the United States, and has no intention to challenge or displace the United States." End quote. So the leaders have had their meeting and made their statements, and the great game of geopolitics goes on. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of messages over the last 24 hours or so. Again, it seems a lot of you guys have been unsubscribed. I'm not exactly sure what YouTube is doing, but it's worth just checking that you are still subscribed if you think that you're supposed to be. And as always, China Update is primarily supported on subscriber support. So if anyone who wants to go that extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable, help me continue making these episodes and putting them up for free every day, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. As always, thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, this week official new COVID infections are surging, with local officials in a particularly difficult position now that the Politburo Standing Committee, as well as the State Council, have both signalled a more balanced zero-COVID policy with some consideration for economic fallout now being required. Local officials appear to be trying more surgical lockdowns rather than blanket lockdowns, but it's unclear whether this approach will be successful in stamping out cases. This current surge will be a big test to this newly defined COVID policy. The ever-sensitive capital, Beijing, is once again seeing renewed concerns. On Monday, Beijing municipal health authorities told residents that they should try to avoid going out unless necessary. In the populous and wealthy Chaoyang district of Beijing, COVID test sites for large-scale testing have been set up along the roadsides and around commercial and office areas. As of yesterday, Monday, large parts of Chaoyang district have been temporarily closed. New daily cases in the capital are now in the hundreds. Yesterday, too, new official cases nationally passed 15,000, with Guangzhou, also known as Canton in English, seeing thousands of new cases by the day. It is in Guangzhou, too, where the new, more balanced zero-COVID policy adjustments will really be put to the test. Quote, "Yes, we will implement the central government's measures faithfully, leaving out secondary close contacts, but the end game has not changed. At the end of the day, we are responsible for bringing the current infection under control because Beijing has made it clear that it has not changed the zero-COVID policy. That means we have to move even faster to identify close contacts and quarantine them." End quote. Investors should be watching the interactions between the central government and the local Cantonese or Guangzhou government closely for clues over whether Beijing is now willing or not to allow high infection numbers in order to protect critical economic centers from blanket lockdowns. Despite surging case numbers nationally, several cities, including Fuzhou in Fujian province, Hefei in Anhui province, and Shanghai, said that they would cancel or suspend mass regional PCR testing in accordance with the new directions from last week. Chinese financial media outlet Yicai writes that PCR testing will no longer be conducted on an administration district scale in Shanghai. Exceptions will be made if the source or chain of contacts are unclear and if the number of cases is unknown in the event of a lengthy transmission period. Regular PCR testing and community screening will continue. with slightly eased but not abandoned zero COVID, and, as we explored yesterday, eased property market policies on the one hand, but surging cases and an already shell-shocked economy on the other, analysts are deeply divided on their short to medium-term outlook for the Chinese economy. Zhang Zhiwei, chief economist at Pinpoint Asset Management, for example, expressed in a note to clients yesterday, quote, "Last week was a major turning point in macro policies in China," end quote, which will, quote, "help reduce policy uncertainty in the market," end quote. Others, however, are more cautious in their outlook. Quote, "With property sales deteriorating and developer credit spreads widening again, data-dependent policymakers may want to stabilize the market by introducing another round of easing measures. That said, on the back of the 20 COVID measures, the 16 property measures may generate notable market reactions without dramatically changing the current economic fundamentals." End quote. Analysts with Nomura Limited yesterday acknowledged that the recent property easing measures represent, quote, "the most crucial pivot," end quote, on the property industry since Beijing's initial crackdown in 2020, but still warned, quote, "the property market has yet to show signs of recovery," end quote, adding, quote, "First, the official narrative is still that housing is for living and not for speculating, and Beijing continues to explore which housing model it will eventually settle upon. Second, Beijing's zero-COVID strategy, despite some recent fine-tuning, will continue to weigh on the property sector." End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I will see you all tomorrow.